Hello and welcome to this presentation on selling or justifying reliability improvement to senior management. My name is Jason Tranter, the founder and managing director of Mobius Institute. Now, if you are interested in reliability improvement or asset management, then I consider this to be one of the most important webinars that I have given on this general subject area. It's the most important because this is the one issue that if you are unsuccessful with, in other words, if you are unable to get senior management support, then I don't believe it is possible to run a truly successful or sustainable reliability improvement initiative. You will have little bits of success, but it won't be sustainable and it won't achieve what it could achieve otherwise. So the rest of this presentation is basically about why I believe that is so and how you win their support. As you're probably well aware, lots of people have tried to improve reliability over the years and not had that much success, and we'll look at that question in a moment. And those people are good people. There's not something wrong with them. Often it's the maintenance department that has taken the lead to improve reliability. They've either taken the lead or the responsibility has been thrust upon them. The trouble is, while maintenance people are perfectly capable of a role like this, most people would say that the prime responsibility of a maintenance person is to keep machines running. It's to fix things that are broken, and the whole focus of reliability is to avoid that machine ever needing fixing in the first place. So there's a little bit of a culture clash, and that can be one issue. It's also the fact that even though maintenance has a role in improving reliability for sure, there are far more sources of unreliability than just what occurs in the maintenance department. So yes, you can have some success, but that's never going to truly be the sole way of improving reliability. There are a lot of organizations that have also tried with more of an engineering or reliability focus, maybe even creating a reliability group, but taking perhaps a more analytical approach. And I apologize for my little joke there, the propeller head with the big calculator. But number one, I would argue that you can't always analyze your way to improving reliability. Analyzing data, having an idea of what your current reliability is important, but you need to do much more than just analyze it. Obvious maybe, but I see a lot of people taking that kind of approach. The other problem is when you create just that reliability group without all the support that I say you need outside the reliability group, people tend to throw the problems over the fence to reliability. We're having a problem, it's your problem to go and find a solution to, and that's just not going to work. A lot of organizations have said, well, this is all about technology. We need vibration monitoring and laser shaft alignment and these sorts of things. And yes, like all of these other areas, it's important. It's not the solution to the problem. You can't monitor your way to reliability. You may get an early warning of a bearing problem, let's say, but that's just an early warning of a problem that shouldn't exist. And that's a lot of the problem with most condition monitoring programs. Their whole focus is detecting problems that shouldn't exist. And in a lot of organizations, they've gone out, spent some money on consultants who have taken the lead. And those consultants may really know what they're talking about. They may be well-intentioned and everything else. But the problem is that often there is not a sufficient transfer of ownership or skills or knowledge. And therefore, when the consultants leave, there's not that culture in the organization to continue the good work that the consultants started, and the program dies. And therefore, unfortunately, a lot of programs end this way, just in frustration. And I believe that in most of those cases, they never really did have senior management support. There might have been enough support to say, yeah, we're going to throw a bunch of money at this technology or a new person in the reliability department or some consulting, but there isn't real belief, there's no real leadership. So let's take a closer look at what we really want to try and achieve with reliability improvement and what we're trying to sell to senior management. So why sell reliability to senior management? I want to cover basically three broad reasons. Number one, now I said this at the beginning, but number one, you will not succeed in creating a truly sustainable and successful reliability improvement program without management support. And if you don't believe me, I've written the text in bigger font. Just kidding. And I will go on and explain why that is. But to change the culture of the organization, to get the support and everything else, you need that support. You certainly need their financial support. There's a lot you can do to improve reliability and exercise or practice true value-add asset management without actually spending a great deal of money. It doesn't cost a lot to do things properly, but there are areas where you will need financial support, and that needs to come from that senior management. And if handled properly, they will provide leadership. That leadership should involve statements like this, that safety and reliability are core to our values and key to our success. Now, if that statement was repeated again and again, if it was on posters, if it was under the email signature or whatever, that's what people have to see, that senior management, it isn't just about profits and so on, which of course, will improve with an improvement in reliability, and it's not just about safety, which will again improve if you deal with reliability. But if those two words are seen side by side, everyone understands safety, and therefore everyone will understand reliability, and they will see that any changes that are being requested of them, and we'll talk much more about that, they will say, okay, well, this is a directive from the top. And therefore, as part of this, they might create a new role, the VP of Reliability. They will support a strategic committee. They will support the formation of reliability teams, and much, 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 much more. And they will look at and be able to lead and drive a multi-site initiative so that each of the sites within your organization, assuming they exist, will all be trying to improve reliability, and will do that in a cooperative way. There's a lot we could say about ISO 55000, but if there is belief and support from senior management, then there may be a drive to achieve 55,000 certification, which is very important and will help things happen below. And the need to perform, benchmark, and develop KPIs in a way will help you sell senior management on this whole thing. But you may need senior management support to get the information you need. Some information isn't readily available, and with their support you can get that information. But the flip side is, if you don't have their support, then it is very difficult to achieve the culture change, which is absolutely necessary unless that message comes from the top. You can't have some person who has a little badge saying, I'm a reliability engineer, really convincing people of the need for reliability. I'm sorry if that's your situation now. I've just never seen it really done successfully. People, they stick their fingers in their ear, maybe not literally, but reliability, that's just not the way we do things here. This is the way we've always done it. Why do we need to change? Well, they do need to change, but they need to understand why. It'll be driven from the top. Culture change is one of the key issues in this whole asset management / reliability improvement initiative. I mentioned it earlier, but just think about the safety message. How was it achieved that there's been such a change in culture related to safety? Everyone within an organization understands the need to improve safety. There are safety posters, but that didn't change within the organization without that senior management support. That it was written into company policy. I mean, you've seen it. That's how the safety message was driven home. That's how the culture changed. That's how all those new practices and the training and everything else occurred. And that's what we need to do with reliability. therefore you need their support to do it. And there are going to be numerous decisions that are made related to design, projects, training, maintenance decisions, production decisions, all sorts of things. And when reliability is a priority, just as people won't do certain things because there's a risk involved, a risk of a safety incident, they will delay production until something can be done safely. Design decisions will have an emphasis on safety. Those same design decisions and production decisions and so many more need to have a priority given to reliability and maintainability and operability and cleanability and all the rest of it, which all comes down to the same thing. Okay. It's also worth commenting, very importantly, that if you don't have that support and you are successful in improving reliability, and this happens very often. I call it stealth mode, but projects are approved, money is given for vibration analysis and other sorts of key parts of the reliability drive. Reliability improves a little bit, but because there was no support, people start to look at reliability itself, the people involved with reliability, as a way of saving money. You get this sort of attitude from the bean counters. Well, what have you done for me lately? Why am I still paying these salaries for people in the reliability group and the vibration group? Hey, we don't have machines failing. Why are we doing this? And you get the new manager who comes in, wants to make a mark for him or herself, and they're thinking, well, what can I do to save the company some money before I move on and get promoted somewhere else? Where are all these reliability people? We don't seem to have a problem here, so why are we paying their salaries, etc.? Why are we paying for training and warranties on instrumentation and all that sort of thing? So they get cut. Now, this graphic I'm about to reveal tells two important stories. The first is, what we're looking at here is the costs associated with maintenance and how the practices change over time. It's called the bow wave effect, and you can see the reference for where I learned about this at the bottom. What it's basically saying is, to begin with, we'll have some amount of reactive maintenance, and that's going to depend on your particular organization, and some amount of proactive work that's going on and condition monitoring that's going on. It could be 100% reactive at your plant. You may already be doing some things. But general thought on this topic is that you need to go ahead and invest a bunch of money, and at a certain point that investment will start to pay itself back, and at a certain time you will be actually reaping the rewards in terms of that investment being overcome by the benefit. So we have, at a certain point, that investment turns into profit, and the time that happens will depend a lot on how you go about implementing the plan. There's a lot we could talk about how to implement the plan properly, but that's not the purpose of this webinar. The first thing I'd like to say about this, though, and it all comes back to what sort of support you get and how you use that support, is that it doesn't have to be a continual period of investment with a delayed period of seeing the rewards or the returns. This is another way to represent how the investment and the returns will work, and that is that we can invest a little, see the returns, invest a little, see the returns, invest, etc., etc., etc. And that can potentially just keep going on and on. So yes, we may need to spend some money, and so that is an additional cost which may not have originally been budgeted and so on. But if we manage it properly, which is what I'll talk about more towards the end of the presentation, you will see some returns, and then you can invest some more. When you've proven yourself, you see some returns, and so on and so forth. Anyway, that's not the real focus on the point I'm trying to make, but it is an important point. When you have invested that money over a period of time, as I described, you will reach a point where the organization will be far more profitable. There will be improved reliability. There'll be improved production output, capacity, availability, and so on. We'll talk more about those sorts of benefits a little later on. And you might find, even though I show this as a flat line, that the profit itself just keeps improving and improving and improving, which is really the reality. And this balance of condition-based maintenance and proactive maintenance will change. That's not really the point of what I want to say. But the point really is that if you don't have senior management on board, realizing that the success they've enjoyed is because of the reliability improvement program, and therefore there is no way they would ever consider just canning that. It'd be like a plant that has been operating safely for a period of time, and their number of safety incidents have really dropped and it's stabilized out and they're all feeling good, and then someone saying, we don't have a safety problem here, so we're going to get rid of the safety officer, we're not going to do induction training anymore, etc., etc. We're going to save some money because this organization is safe. Well, most people would see how silly that is. Unfortunately, most people don't see it the same way with reliability. They think, oh well, we've fixed all the problems, we've fixed all the machines, they're all going to run properly now. It just doesn't work that way. What happens is the bad old days return very quickly. If it took a couple of years to get this under control, it'll take less than that before it returns to the bad old days. This has been done again and again and again and again. Over my 30 years of involvement in this area, I've seen this just repeat itself. Call it the reliability roller coaster. That reliability is improved. You get a bit of support, we make some inroads, things change, and then the person who was driving it gets promoted or coaxed away to another plant. But because the culture hadn't changed, because we don't have senior management support, too bad. Reliability falls in a hole again. And whereas I might have been involved in this process, I'll come back later and hear, oh yeah, we've got all these problems. We're thinking about a reliability improvement initiative. We're thinking about getting condition monitoring going. It's like, you used to have a fantastic plan. So off they go again, and they get some money and they get some approvals, and they might even do better this time. But the same thing happens again. They didn't have the support, they didn't have culture change, the reliability isn't in the blood of the organization, they are vulnerable to the one champion leaving, and it dies again, and we could just keep going. It's just a very common situation. Too common. So, what if you don't get support? If you think, it's too hard to get the support, it's just unnecessary perhaps, whatever you happen to think, you can try operating in stealth mode, as I like to call it. And that's where you say, hey, I'm just going to go out and buy some monitoring equipment, buy some special tools, go and buy my laser alignment system and vibration program, do a little bit of training. Hey, I'll go off to this conference and listen to a few people talk. I'll go to even a training course and learn about root cause failure analysis or something. And sure, you'll get a few people who believe and understand for a little while, and you'll make some improvements, but as I say, you'll be on the roller coaster. I guarantee it. I've seen it so many times. Doesn't mean to say that you won't have some success, and all that success is good, and it will be a good investment. But there will be no culture change if you approach it that way, and as I say, you'll be on the roller coaster. So, what is the message that we want in the mind of the senior executive? What do we want them to understand about what it is you're trying to achieve? There's a couple of ways you can approach it. The carrot and the stick. Let's look at the stick. We can tell them about things that they want to avoid. These are problems they can avoid if they improve reliability. They will have fewer safety incidents. No doubt about it. You improve reliability, you improve safety. They will have fewer environmental incidents. They will be more insurable. Potentially you can even lower your premiums, but you don't want to be in a position where an insurance company, and they're getting smarter and smarter and smarter, they look at your organization and say, why would I want to insure you? There's just too much risk, and that sort of thing's going on. ISO 55000 is a relatively new thing, but I have no doubt, and the industry has no doubt, that in time, government regulators, shareholders will be saying, we want you to be ISO 55000 compliant or certified, because it's a demonstration that you are managing your assets properly. So get ahead of the curve and get onto it now. I mentioned regulator compliance and just the viability of the plant. That's a risk that hangs over so many organizations, and people, sure, competition can get the better of an organization, cheap imports, whatever it is, but I have seen so many organizations shut the door to a particular plant, when I would argue that reliability is the root cause of the poor results, not anything else. On the other side of things, let's be positive about it. What are the positive benefits of improving reliability? It's increasing the production output of an organization, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. But we increase the availability by reducing downtime due to failures, but we can increase the capacity of the plant as well, because we'll have much less planned downtime. We will reduce costs, and I'm going to go through what some of those costs are in just a moment. The site will be more reliable, dependable, and stable. So many organizations, particularly in a production environment, they try to squeeze more out of the plant, but it just becomes very cyclical. We get some more production, but machines break and it drops back, and then we make some improvements, replace equipment, whatever we got to do. We achieve better results, then worse results, better results, then worse results, and it's very cyclical. You improve reliability, you smooth out that cyclical behavior. And you improve morale and improve job satisfaction too, which I see as very positive things. Another thing that you really want senior management to understand is who in the organization influences reliability. Now, some people point the finger right at the maintenance department and say, they're installing the equipment all wrong, they're letting things break or whatever. And that's just wrong. It's unfair. Yes, there might be practices, like I just described, that do result in poor reliability, but they're not solely responsible. The reliability group, hey, if you've already got a reliability group, then as I said earlier, people point the finger at those guys and say, well, yes, they would be the people who are responsible to improve reliability. They have the greatest influence over reliability. But that's not the whole answer either. The whole answer is that everyone within the organization, one way or another, influences reliability. Just as everyone influences safety, everyone influences reliability. Now, this diagram, has a lot of bits in it, but starting along here, the design process, that's where a lot of, poor reliability gets designed, or inherent reliability gets designed right into the machine. Or let's just say it doesn't get designed out of the process in the machine. The procurement process is responsible. The way spares are managed, not only what spares are chosen to be kept in inventory, but the way the management of the system and the way they're stored on the shelf. I said that spares management. The planning process and the scheduling process, or the lack of it. But certainly the way this is handled affects the reliability. The maintenance process, installing the equipment in the first place, the way the ongoing care, lubrication, cleaning, and all those sorts of things, certainly affects reliability. And the way the equipment is operated. Now, there are therefore many influences, and all the people who are involved in any way all play their part. But likewise, as I've been trying to say in this presentation so far, so does the senior executive, because they're the role models, they're the one sending the message, they're the one putting pressure perhaps on people to take shortcuts and try and achieve short-term financial gain rather than long-term. And there's the sales process as well. Now, of course, you could come from a pumping station, sewage pumping station, and you probably don't have people out there selling that. But, for people in the manufacturing where people are out there selling a product, they can put unfair demands on the plant and say, well, we have to achieve this higher output. Likewise, they can have the opposite effect and say, we feel so unsure about our plant's ability to deliver the products we want to sell, they will sell to their expectation, which means that the plant doesn't have to produce quite as much. So it can work both ways. Ultimately, everyone here has a part to play. Everyone needs to understand why we have reliability problems and how they can benefit if reliability improves, and how they influence reliability, and how they can contribute to the improvement of reliability. So, another message that needs to go to senior management is for them to understand the risks. Now, you may think they understand the risks, but if you go through a proper criticality analysis, which means you understand the consequences of failure and you have a better idea of the likelihood of failure, and you also create a bad actor list. You say, well, where are all the failures? What's failing most often, second most, third most, and whatever. What is that costing you, and how does the equipment that is failing relate to our criticality? If we've got equipment failing and it's highly critical, that is serious. Now, when you present that to management, that makes it all real. And I'll mention a bit more about this later, but you are turning, numbers and dollars and that into real situations. Hey, if we don't do something, we risk this equipment failing again, which, will affect production and so on, but could risk people's lives and the environment as well. So you have to help them understand the issues and the opportunities that exist in their plant. You have to make it real. So how do we sell the benefits to senior management? Now, we've talked a bit about it, the carrot and the stick and all that sort of thing, but how do we actually go about selling it? So I'm going to say that there's 3 basic approaches, and while I describe those approaches, I think you need to understand the nature of the senior management in your organization and what the ultimate culture is, because there's no doubt that, for example, in a co-op, the people involved in senior management may have even come from a farming background and may understand reliability. In privately owned businesses, people tend to have a different view of reliability. They have more of a long-term view than a short-term view. Government, municipalities and those sorts of organizations will have a certain view and a certain management structure, and then of course public companies also have a different sort of approach to all of this. But anyway, first, we can take a very technical approach to all of this, and we can say, hey, we can do RCM analysis and understand failure modes. We can do vibration analysis and infrared and all these good technical things. And, if you're a technical person, you may feel most comfortable talking about those things, and you may believe it and feel like you've just got to explain to these people so they understand it as well. Well, generally speaking, people in senior management, they don't understand, they don't even want to. And again, you've got to assess your situation, but don't be overly optimistic in this area. A lot of that stuff is noise, it's details. I hate to be crude about it, but it's just, look, show me the money. What can you do? The real message is, what is the added value that you're going to provide? Every single person in the organization, really at the end of the day, should be adding value to that business, or you shouldn't be there. The maintenance department, it's the old saying, the maintenance department is really a profit center. Shouldn't be considered a cost center. Absolutely. Everyone involved with maintenance should consider that what they're doing is a very key role. They are adding value by keeping those machines running. Well, we can add more value by making sure they don't break down and have problems in the first place, and they run at full speed, delivering high quality products, etc., etc. And we can go around the organization and as I did earlier with the design department, the procurement, etc. It's all about the added value. So when we're trying to sell this approach to senior management, it's got to be about the value that we're adding. And I'm going to come back to this soon to talk more about how you can talk about the added value. Because we really have to think about things in financial terms. Generally speaking, people in senior management will be far more savvy with business and economics and finances and so on than they ever would with technical issues. So, you have to understand the benefits to your organization, whether it's increased production output or lower costs or compliance. You have to understand what it means to your business. Because it's not enough to just have these vague comments. Oh, we'll increase production, we'll lower costs. You have to take it further. It's not enough to just keep it that simple. You really have to understand the business case. You have to look at what the dynamics are of your business. On the one hand, it's where the money is being spent, the maintenance expenditure and so on. You have to understand that side of things, but you have to understand what drives that business. Is it improving reliability because you've got to have the plant running to deal with water or sewage or something? Is it about how much iron ore you produce or milk or cheese or something like that? Etc., etc. You've got to understand what it is that makes that business tick and how you can make it run better. And that's why, I talk about availability and costs, and I mentioned safety and the other issues as well. But in some organizations, availability is the real big issue. In other ones, costs. But and that means how do you go about presenting things? I remember a situation not very long ago where a person was from a food production plant, and as far as they were concerned, they were earning a lot of money, and all they wanted to do is produce their food product as in as high a volume as they could. So when we talked to them about costs, I was like, look, that's not the issue. I don't care how much we spend on replacement motors. And they literally bought motors in high volume so that they had them there, they could switch these motors out. But the point that was lost is that every time they had a motor failure, they may take that cost of the motor as just a part of their business. The thing is, they were losing production time. So, okay, yes, we can avoid those costs, but we can keep that machine running, producing that product, and suddenly their eyes lit up and it's like, oh yeah, of course. Now it might seem obvious, but again, you've got to present it in a way that really makes, really gets their attention. Now, I talk about costs, and one of the problems is there are a lot of organizations and the message from the top may be, we have to reduce cost, we have to reduce cost. The truth of the matter is that, and studies have shown it, research have shown it, you can't cost save your way to success. It just doesn't work that way, and particularly if you say, well, let's try and, reduce the maintenance costs, and you squeeze maintenance. So they stop doing their lubrication rounds, and they cut corners, they have people who aren't as well skilled, they don't have the right tools, they don't have the right training and all that sort of stuff. And as a result, as you squeeze those costs in maintenance, you reduce reliability, and it's an equation that doesn't work. It's not the way forward. But lo and behold, if you, instead of focusing on reducing costs, you focus on improving reliability, well, look at that. The costs go down anyway. So that is an important message to get across. It's an important concept to understand. And where are the costs that we can save? Well, we could write a longer list, but we can reduce maintenance costs. We can reduce operating costs. We can reduce capital expenditure, and we can defer capital expenditure. For example, we don't have to expand the capacity of the plant because the plant is actually capable of producing what you want right now. We can reduce the costs associated with compliance. We can lower and reduce the working capital, and part of that, you might say, is reducing the spares inventory. That's something we could talk about for a very long time to understand all of those areas. We can't really spend that time today, I'm afraid. And I've talked about increasing revenue through increasing production. And I put this slide in here mostly just to sort of make this point. You've heard the term OEE. I would hope. It's something to look into. Overall equipment effectiveness. And really, although different texts sometimes describe it a little bit differently, but it's the combination of the unplanned downtime, in other words, when equipment fails, the rate and the quality. So if we can reduce the unplanned downtime, reduce the number of breakdowns, increase the production rate and improve reliability, improve quality, then we produce more product that is of a suitable quality for sale, and we don't have the downtime. And those three things combined together gives us our OEE. We get improved customer satisfaction, so hopefully they buy more and they don't decide to buy less, and we have less planned downtime, and that's where we can talk about capacity. So we've got availability, OEE, and capacity. So earlier I made the point, hey, we have to add value. Now we're going to dive in deeper into economics and finances and so on, and understand that a little better. Now this chart may seem a bit complicated, but I'm going to attempt to explain what all these elements are. At the end here, this little box is the economic value add. So let's say you're a business person and you're thinking, hey, I've got 10,000, 100,000, whatever, to spend. And you're looking for the best investment. You're trying to say, well, if I spend it on this opportunity, what does that cost me? If I'm thinking of spending, let's put it in context of this senior business person, $100,000. Some of that money may be money that you already have available to you. So there's the question of the opportunity cost of keeping that money in the bank or whatever. And then if you have to borrow that money, what does that cost you? And and if you have to finance it some other way, then there's a cost associated with it. So there's the cost of that capital right here. But then we get some income as a result of that investment. So our value add is how the income I achieve through that investment compares to the cost of the $100,000 in the first place. And that's the way most business people think of any investment. What's it costing me? What am I going to earn? It's the opportunity cost, you might say. And we can then follow this backwards to see, how we measure our cost of capital and how we achieve that income. So let's look at it in a bit more detail. First, I just wanted to mark, because it didn't fit in the boxes, there's my overall equipment effectiveness. RONA is return on net assets. So I've got assets in the plant, all those machines and everything else. What is my return? I've got all this money sunk in those machines. What money am I getting back as a result? And if we're going to make further investments, what's my return? And this WACC, it's the weighted average cost of capital. So that's what I was trying to describe before. What is it costing me to have that $100,000 to invest in something? So let's look at it in a bit more detail. If we look at the business end of it, you might say, so there's my cost of capital. So, that's combined with my net assets and my cost of capital. And on the other hand, I can say, well, I've got a return on my assets. What money am I getting back? And I compare that to the assets. So, it's not enough to just say, well, I'm going to earn $50,000. It's what's that compared to? What did I put up? So that gives us these two components, which come to that's the way we calculate our economic value add. But how do I get to my RONA, my return on net assets? Well, I have to know what my assets are, what my total asset turnover is, and my profit margin. And to understand my profit margin, I need to know my income, what's coming in, and the sales revenue. So yes, whether I'm selling iron ore or cheese, as I described before, there's a certain amount of sales revenue coming in, but what is the actual operating income that I get to keep? So the ratio of that gives me my profit margin, the ratio of those gives me my total net asset turnover. And if I'll give you my email address at the end if you'd like some references on how to understand this all a bit better, then I can give you that. But at the end of the day, to understand this component, because this is what we are really trying to influence. We can influence all of this in a number of areas, as I'll describe in just a moment. But what we have to look at is what are our costs, what are our overheads, and how we can influence those, and what increase in revenue we're going to achieve. And that's where we get to the end of this chart, where we have a real influence from a reliability standpoint. And I've grayed out a couple of boxes just to sort of try and simplify the diagram a little bit. So here we have the number of planned hours that we intend to run the facility or run the production plant or whatever. And that gives us our theoretical capacity. Now, as I say, that's planned hours. Could we plan to run it more? Yes, absolutely. If we could improve reliability and stopped having such long periods of shutdown doing unnecessary work, and that unnecessary work creates reliability problems, if we did that, then we would increase the theoretical capacity. But here it is, this is when we are attempting to run the plant outside of the shutdown period or periods. But that is multiplied against our OEE. And the OEE, as I summarized before, is a combination of the availability, the production rate, how many tons per hour, let's say, and the quality of the product. We want to minimize or maximize the availability, maximize the rate, and maximize the quality. Because at the end of the day, we take our theoretical capacity, multiplied by this OEE as a percentage, and we get the actual production. This is what we get to sell. It's the product that is high enough quality that we get to sell. And this is where it's amazing the difference we can make. See, over here we have our overheads, and yes, there's depreciation and other fixed costs, and in fact we could talk about that much more. But certainly just looking at the maintenance costs. And an organization can say, well, we're employing this number of people and they have costs associated with operating that side of our business. And so a person can cross their arms and look at that and say, right, how are we going to squeeze some money out of that? We've got to reduce costs, because if we reduce the costs and then we look at our profit, if you like, it increases if we can reduce those costs. But let's face it, how much can we really save through that process? And what is the long-term effect? Even long-term, mid-term, even short-term. It's all bad. This is where we need to focus. There's such an incredible story right here. If we can increase the availability, and there are other benefits as I've mentioned, but if we increase the availability, the rate and the quality, and maybe even spend a little bit more in maintenance initially to give them the right tools and training and so on, but get them focusing on proactive work instead of reactive work, man, what we do is we may initially even bump this up. We will eventually knock it down, but we're really going to see the impact here. But of course, you have to understand your business. You might say, well, yeah, but we're not trying to do that because we're a sewage plant, or we have a sold out. We can't. Producing more doesn't help us. But in any case, by doing all these things, we do reduce our maintenance costs anyway. Anyway, moving right along, the fact is that we can bump up our planned hours, improve the availability, the production rate, the quality, which all has an effect of improving sales revenue. And what's more is the people selling the product can rub their hands together and say, great, I can now go out and sell more iron ore and more cheese, to use those earlier examples, because I have confidence that we can supply it, and we're not going to have unhappy customers when we can't. As I said, we will reduce those maintenance costs initially because of that little investment. Yeah, we might bump it up, but we are going to reduce it. We're going to reduce the net assets as well. In part of that because we don't have to purchase additional capital equipment to achieve that higher production output that we might be trying to achieve. So the end result is that we do reduce our costs, increase our sales, etc., and big time we improve the economic value add. It's a terrific business opportunity, what we're talking about here. Asset management by improving reliability is a terrific business opportunity, and you've got to get that message across. But if you can learn this language that you're seeing here, if you can learn that language, you'll have a much easier chance of convincing senior management. They should be rubbing their hands together. They should be salivating. How much do you need? How quickly can we do it? This is fantastic. If you start talking about vibration analysis, we need to do shaft alignment, and I want money to send them off to a conference so that they learn a bit more. It's like, yeah, right, okay. Everyone's proposals sound good and they don't understand them. So, okay. But if you want to be able to do these things, you do need to speak the language, and you do need some information at your fingertips. Do you know what the value would be if you improve production output by 1%? So each percent you improve production output, what's that worth? What's it worth to reduce your maintenance costs by 1%, etc. You can see them all there. I won't read them all out. You need to understand all that. You need to go and find out. And you might say, but that's not readily available information. Make it readily available. Twist some arms, whatever you got to do. Go find out what that information is, or make your best estimate. Find out what numbers you can use that will be believed by senior management. Okay. You need to learn this language of return on investment and payback period, and the internal rate of return and the hurdle rate and the discounted cash flow and net present value. I was actually originally in my presentation, because we do this now, e-learning training, I tried to explain all of those sorts of things, but look, there really isn't time already. This is taking too long. Okay, but if you can understand those terms, if you can speak those terms, if you can understand the time value of money, that that $10,000 today is worth more than $10,000 in a year. You have to appreciate those issues, and when you're looking at your cash flow and so on, you need to take those sorts of things into account in certain circumstances. Now, the other side to all of this, which really follows on from what I've already said, is think about things from a personal point of view. Now, there's a whole psychology to selling anything. The art of persuasion and just what it takes for someone to feel comfortable with you and basically buy what you're selling. Again, don't have time to talk all about that in great detail, but you do need to understand what makes the senior manager tick. What are they, as human beings, trying to achieve in their roles? What are their responsibilities and accountabilities? How is their success measured? What are their priorities? How do they want to be remembered? What are their goals, and how can you take reliability improvement and help them tick all their boxes? Yep, they're going to be concerned about what shareholders think. They want their brand to be protected. They've got to be concerned about regulators and risk and quality and safety, and that's the sort of thing that they have on their to-do lists and their priorities and their goals for the year and so on. And the good news is, we can help them with all those things. But you have to also think, what do they fear? And one thing is, if they know there's a problem and don't take action, they are now liable in one form or another, and it can be in the worst possible way, as in legally and getting locked up, etc. But so you bring these issues to their attention and say, well, we are vulnerable in these areas. We are not doing this work as we should, etc., all the things we talked about earlier. When they understand through your criticality analysis and bad actor analysis, doing plant walkthroughs and so on, you are bringing it to their attention, and now they're concerned, if I don't do anything and something goes wrong, well, hey, I've been told I'm responsible now. And they also fear, you might say, backing the wrong horse. Now, maybe that's an Australian term, I'm not sure, but it's They've got lots of ways they can invest their money. So the organisation can invest in lots of different areas, and they might be very comfortable in some areas, and you're coming along saying we're going to improve reliability, and that may not have been on their radar. So you have to remove their fear of failure. You have to make them confident that it's worth spending the money with what you're proposing. And the good news is that reliability ticks all the boxes. It is a good investment, and you can prove that to them, and you can demonstrate it. It improves safety, reduces risk, keeps regulators happy. It enables the shareholders or the private owners of the business to achieve a better return. The company brand is more secure. We're not going to be reading in the papers tomorrow that Company X has had a terrible accident, or Company X can't provide products, or Company X has failed and therefore, a car company can't produce its products, or whatever. You don't want that sort of problem associated with your company's brand, and they won't regret the decision. You just have to help senior management see the light. It is a good opportunity. So, how do you put a value on reliability? Part of the answer to this question is knowing what your starting point is. In your plant right now, is it mostly reactive maintenance, or are you doing some time-based preventive maintenance, or are you already doing condition-based or predictive maintenance? Planning and scheduling, are you doing that? Are you already doing precision alignment and balancing and so on? So obviously everyone that we deal with, they're somewhere along that journey to improving reliability, and therefore the return on any investment, which would be different investment, depending where you are along that journey, is going to be different. But you certainly have to understand what your starting point is. But it is surprising sometimes when an initial question to people within an organization, what are you doing? You get a certain answer. You scratch a little deeper and, for example, I've got here precision alignment and balancing, and a person can answer the question, oh yeah, we bought some laser alignment, and we've got someone in a planning role, and so on and so forth. But when you dig beneath the surface, you find out, oh yeah, you got a laser alignment system sitting in a shelf, in a cupboard somewhere. You've got a planner, but that guy, man or woman, gets dragged away on jobs all the time, and they're planning for tomorrow, not for next week, etc., etc., etc. You got to really understand what your situation is. And so one way to appreciate what your opportunity is to benchmark your organization. Now, the ideal way is to go to an organisation like Aberdeen Research or SMRP and say, well, here are some statistics for businesses, ideally even in my industry, to say, for example, what OEE are they achieving now? And then you have to measure your own OEE. So you can say, okay, here's where we are. This is what's possible. And of course, there's conference papers that presented, and books, and if nothing else, you can just look back in time and say, well, what was the plant design capacity, or what's the best result? What is our best day of production we've ever achieved? And at least, measure against that. One way or another, you need to measure so that you can say, well, this is at the very least what we hope to achieve. There is lots of information out there, as I say, in books and conferences and training and so on. But I'll just mention a couple of them. This I thought was a great comment by Jeff Dudley, ex-corporate reliability and maintenance director at Dow Chemical. Looking at all of their sites, his conclusion, as an average you might say, is that they are wasting 10% of their revenue. So what's 10% of revenue worth? How many dollars is that worth? And is that what you think you can save by cutting a few maintenance jobs and doing those sorts of things and getting rid of the guys who lube your motors and whatnot? Of course not. There's a huge difference. They're wasting 15% of their resources. They're also disappointing their customers, disengaging their customers, and they're constantly dealing with new and repeated unplanned events. And that's the trouble with reactive maintenance. It's just a nasty spiral, and we could talk much more about that, but not now. Now, we don't need to look at this in great detail, but Aberdeen Research great work they've done, but they basically were able to categorize what they considered their best in class, the laggards, and sort of the middle group. And when you compare the best in class to the laggards, the best in class enjoy less than a tenth of the unscheduled downtime as the laggards. So what would that be worth? What would 26% higher OEE mean to you? What would that be worth dollar-wise? What if you could reduce your costs by 30%? Etc., etc., etc. Your downtime, safety, etc. You can read them. You can pause the presentation if you like. Lots of value. There was some research by IBM as well. Labor utilization up, increase in planned maintenance, etc., etc. Big dollars in this particular research. So a very simple approach you can take is just to say, well, if you have to replace a bearing, let's say, what does it cost in the parts, the labor, if any consulting or other services are required, etc., and what downtime is associated with just replacing a bearing? Well, what if that bearing failed and it wasn't detected, it seized, and therefore there's some secondary damage? So now we've got maybe the whole motor that needs to be replaced, or the shaft and coupling. What labour hours do we have now? And there could be overtime labour hours. What additional downtime did we incur? And there's lots of examples and case studies out there. But just doing that comparison is a very simple way to prove the benefit of even just condition monitoring. Now, some people go a little bit overboard and they say, oh, I just detected a bearing fault. I'm going to save $300,000 because if that failed at 2 a.m. in the morning during a high production period and no one detected it, and the shaft failed, etc., 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 and we lost so many hours of production, this is what it would cost. Yeah, but people get a bit jaded with that sort of thing. So what you can do is scale it all back and say, well, I'm going to drop it by 50%, even 70%, and say, yes, there was a chance that the results of the bearing failure weren't as severe, and we may have even detected it another way. Someone might have been walking past the motor and heard it, and you dealt with it. So drop the probability of finding the problem and the problem even occurring. You can still easily justify things like condition monitoring and shaft alignment and so on, even by dropping that back to 30%. As in 30% of the benefits. It's an easy business case. So, what are the key steps in gaining senior management support? Now, okay, hopefully I've convinced you that you do need the senior management support. Hopefully I've talked about, or convinced you of the way you've got to present things in financial terms and personal terms. But you may be sitting there right now thinking, well, that's all great, but I don't necessarily have all that information. Where do I start? So we have, and I try to keep these things keep the commercial side out of this, but we've developed this thing called the Roadmap to Reliability, which is a chart with all these blocks and so on. I'm not showing that right now, but we've also developed a process, a sort of sequence of steps, so that if you are starting from purely reactive, you're sort of starting from here, and then you're going to complete each step one by one, and there's continuous improvement and so on, so that ultimately you end up with a very reliable plant with a great reliable culture and low safety or high safety, low safety incidents and so on. But these first two steps are really what you need to go through, because this step here is where you've got senior management support. I think it's so important that I've marked it out special. So let's just have a quick look at that. Number one, okay, I'm a training person and that's just my thing. But the fact is that before you attempt any of this, you need to understand what you're talking about, how to go about doing it. And you can assess your own needs if you're the person going to try and do this. But yes, you need to understand random failures versus time-based failures, and you need to understand how to recognize what the opportunities are, how to do benchmarking, KPIs, how to present the business case, how to roll out the program, etc., etc., etc. So I would say you start with training. Get to know what you got to do. Then we're going to benchmark. Now, this won't be a big formal benchmark. This is just to get started, but it really helps you to understand, what is best practice, and because soon we'll be using this information to sell your case. We need to understand where you stand. So it's kind of like putting a flag in the ground and saying, hey, this is where we were back on, this particular date in this year. Because we always want to be able to compare ourselves back to this time. But we'll take a look at our maintenance costs, and we'll do a bit of Pareto analysis to see where we're spending most of our money. We'll, for example, have a look at where we're spending our labour hours with overtime labour and contractors. Because when we go through this, we'll have less labour overtime. We'll use fewer contractors. We'll look at how much reactive versus preventive maintenance and condition-based if we're doing that at all. So we want to know our current state, and then we want to go on and do a very basic criticality analysis. Now, there's a very formal way to do this, but at this stage you probably won't have the supports and the tools in place to do it properly. That'll come later. For right now, it is possible to get a pretty good grasp on what your critical assets are. The assets with the highest consequence of failure and the highest likelihood of failure. And we could talk about that in more detail, but this just gives you a good feel for what your important, where your risks are, really, is what it does. And then, knowing that, we're going to take a closer look at how we're managing, especially those critical assets. What do we do now? Is it just all reactive? How quickly is that equipment repaired? What sort of spares do we have? And again, this is just so that you can get started and do it all properly, but having this information will help you sell the program. So, we want to assess how we are managing our critical assets. What are the risks associated, and how do our practices support that risk? Where are we most vulnerable? You want that information, and we're going to try and find the low-hanging fruit. We want to identify some projects with a short return on investment, with minimal or even no investment if we possibly can, and we will do that by performing a plant walkthrough and creating our simplified bad actor list. Our bad actor list is our list of the equipment we have in the plant that fails most frequently, that gives us most problems, that sort of causes the most downtime. Now again, as I say, this isn't a formal approach at this point. All of this is to help you, on the one hand, put a flag in the ground and say this is how terrible things were today, but it's also to produce ammunition for what comes next. Ammunition and information to help you justify what's going on. You don't want to be vague in front of site management. You don't want to be vague in front of senior management. And so at this stage, we're going to develop a preliminary plan. We're going to say, hey, listen, I've identified these 10 projects where I think, we can go ahead. In some cases, it's going to be people doing things differently. In other cases, it's just straight fixes, for problems we have that we could easily avoid. And as part of this, we're going to develop a bit of a cash flow model that, okay, this is what I want to spend and where I want to spend it, and this is what, the return that I expect. So at this stage, we should be in a pretty good position that we know what our risks are and what our opportunities are, simply put. But now we need to go and get that support. Now, rather than taking that information to senior management, because we haven't really run any of those projects yet, we've identified those 10 projects, for example, let's do something about it. So now we're going to go to site management. Now you might already have that support, but you might go to plant management or even maintenance manager if that's not what you are, and say, okay, this is the opportunity. This is what I want to do now. We've got certain risks, and these are the benefits, and here's my strategy. And to start with, we want to get approval for even just a cost-free project, something that's not going to, you're not going out and spending tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on something. This is just something you can go and do and get some reward for it. So we're going to do that. But while we're out there doing that, start to see how people react. Some people wonder what you're doing and why you're changing what they're doing, and etc. And others you'll find are the natural leaders. They may not be in a management position or a supervisor or anything, but there are some people who get it and have natural leadership capabilities, people who will stick their neck out, people who will, take a bit of ridicule, take a bit of, the self-doubters and say, no, this is the right approach, let's do it. Because they're going to be your allies later, and they're going to help you achieve the much bigger goals. And we're going to document our results, and then we're going to go ahead and do the same thing, but now we're going to ask for a bit of money. Hey, okay, just through the site budget, let's just take a bit of money and do this or that. Small projects. And all the training would help you understand what these opportunities are. We're going to document them. Then we're going to perform a basic audit, because if we can get the sort of accounting staff to say, yes, this is what was spent, this is where it was spent, and this is what the benefits are as a result, then that information is going to speak much louder than anything you would say to senior management. Because now we're going to sit down and do a sort of preliminary, roadmap plan. We're going to say, okay, this is what I think we can do in the future. We're going to continue these projects, but we want to do much more. And I talk about the roadmap to reliability because it's just the name we've put to a bunch of very practical, common sense steps you can take to improve reliability in a sustainable way. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to say, well, what are you going to do next? And what are you going to do after that? What are you going to do after that? How are you going to get the people on side? How are you going to maintain support, etc., etc., etc.? And what's it going to cost? And where are the returns going to come? Etc., etc. This is where you want to have a pretty good idea of what you want the next few years to look like. Not to say that won't change, but at the very least, you need something to say, this is the value that we're going to add to the business. This is why this is a great investment. Because now you are prepared to do what I said earlier in the presentation. Now you are armed. Now you've built some trust. You've proven that you can do what you say you're going to do. You'll have site support. When you go in front of senior executive and say, this is what I want to do, this is what we've achieved already, this is the fantastic opportunity you have in this business, they're going to go for it. Anything less, well, maybe they won't go for it. That'll be your judgment. But this little procedure I've put together here, that's one way to go armed and ready to succeed, and to gain that support so that you'll have that success in the future as well. And so, we've taken these two steps, because when you get that support, you're going to go much further. You're going to get a steering committee, you're going to get HR involved, and there's lots of steps, and this is not the place to really go through it all, but this is a plan that will work, that where it's been implemented in the past, it has worked. So, what are the do's and don'ts? Just briefly before we wrap this up. We have to understand the opportunity and the risks. We have to be able to demonstrate how improving reliability and managing our assets properly, we will add value and we will avoid the stick. Now, by avoiding all those issues, safety, environmental, that is adding value because of the costs associated. If we look at it purely, coldly as a financial issue, it's all about adding value. But you have to appreciate what drives your senior management. What is going to make them want to say, yes, this is a great idea, you have my full support. But to do that, it's a good idea to, as we say, get some runs on the board. Prove yourself. Show that you can do it. Show that this isn't just some theory you heard about in some webinar. And when you do get going, continually communicate the benefits. You've got to have everyone understand that the success they're enjoying in the business is all to do with improving reliability, so that they never think, oh, we've got to cut this and cut back on what we're trying to do. But don't feel like you can convince them technically. That is, yeah, you might convince them for a little while, but they're going to wonder 2 weeks later, why are we doing that again? What was that he was talking about? be careful with when you talk about cost avoidances. You detect a problem and you avoid these costs. People like to know what they're going to earn, not so much what they're going to avoid. I mean, everyone's risk averse and wants to understand that side of it, but it's better if you can talk about the benefits rather than being over enthusiastic about what you're going to save by saying, I detect a problem and we avoid these costs. That's my point. And don't assume you'll be successful without that executive support. Yes, I visited lots of plants that can point to a condition monitoring program that does a great job, and they've got laser alignment going and all of that. It's a great job. You are adding value. People should be patting you on the back. But if you step back and look at the bigger picture of who really believes in the philosophy of condition-based maintenance, who really believes in improving reliability, the fact is it's not doing what you are capable of doing. You're not achieving all the benefits possible, and so that's why we're here. So I apologize if you are hoping that this would be a shorter presentation, but I really hope you've found it useful. I hope I have added value to that hour and 10 minutes was worth it, and that you can put this to good use and help improve reliability in your plant. If you're interested, we actually have these meetings called Roadmap to Reliability Summit. That's basically the bigger picture of what we talked about covered in 2 days instead. And if I can be commercial just for a moment, you can turn me off if you don't want to hear anything commercial, but we do have this product called iLearn Reliability, e-learning that takes you through all of this stuff. I mean, from the big picture to the small picture, achieving culture change, the technical things you've got to do, getting everybody in the organization singing from the same song sheet, everyone understanding safety is important, everyone understanding reliability is important. You can buy it to just help you understand all this much better so that you can speak about it better, or you can buy the sort of enterprise edition. Now, again, I'm sorry for being commercial, but I have left it to the end. I do want to say, though, that what I've just talked about in this presentation isn't there to create the sale, or isn't there because we happen to sell a product that helps you with this. The product exists because of everything I just said is true. You have to have senior management support. You have to speak their language. It's up to you how you go about achieving that goal. But I hope this presentation has helped you do that.